Ashley?
Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's do it.
The
Let's
Mark
do
Thompson
it.
Show.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. How about it for our Friday political analysts? They look at the world. They look at politics. They look at the world of politics. The former senior correspondent for ABC, longtime White House correspondent, joins us every Friday. He's Jim Avila. And this man who has been providing political analysis on one show or another, both on network television and on various podcasts and other offerings I have for, I think we've almost spent a decade together. He has forgotten more about politics than most of us will ever know. He's the great Michael Shure, everyone. Yep. Michael, welcome. And welcome, Jim. I am excited to have you both as it's almost difficult to keep up with all that's going. I see. Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry. I see that. All that's going on. I mean, I know Joe Biden was in transit in this week. He came out to California, surveyed damage. Federal funds are going to be applied here in California, so much of the damage from the storm. At the same time, he's got his own storm going. I'm talking about the dock thing. We spoke a bit about this in prior conversations, but it does seem as though these doc scandals, these classified documents, et cetera, they keep cropping up. Again, I ask you to assess that situation legally from a practical standpoint and also politically. Jim, we'll start with you, Jim Avila.
Well, what I would recommend that anyone who's really interested in this take a deep dive and read the opinion piece today in the New York Times from a journalist who wrote about Watergate, and then writes today about the difference between what Trump did and what Biden did. And the fact that he believes that, which is contrary to what I've heard a lot of, is that Biden's troubles actually will help prosecutors prosecute Donald Trump, because Biden's actions actually showed exactly what you should do if you inadvertently bring home some documents that you shouldn't have done. Look, is it sloppy? Have they handled it in a sloppy way? Yes, but there is such a dramatic difference. He compares it. It's an interesting analogy. He compares it to someone who mistakenly goes through the shopping line at your grocery store and forgot to pay for a particular item, and you go out the door and that alarm rings. Well, Joe Biden went back to the counter, put out the material, and paid for it. Donald Trump heard the alarm and ran through it and tried to elude the authorities. And then when they caught him, said, wait a minute, that's mine anyway. So there is a huge difference between what is happening here, and that prosecutors, in fact, do look at what has happened before and what is happening with others. They're looking at, and I'll finish up here, Michael, I'm sure, has lots to say about this, is that they look at what happened with Petraeus. Petraeus took the documents, gave them to his girlfriend to write a memoir, that he was prosecuted. Hillary Clinton had some documents. She didn't do anything with them and was not prosecuted because they compared what she did to what Petraeus did. And they found that there wasn't criminal intent. So it was a very interesting perspective, if you have a chance to read this New York Times article, about, because I had kind of thought, as I think conventional wisdom was, this muddies up the waters and is going to let Trump go. He contends that prosecutors will actually be able to use the difference here to decide to prosecute Trump and not Biden.
Such a great
Michael?
analogy, though.
Yeah, really a great parallel. Go ahead, Michael.
I mean, one of the things, just going off what Jim said, that's important too, is that these are two different sets. These are two different cases. And while neither will be presumably decided before the other, they'll probably run contemporary to one another. And I don't see how this really, hurts the case against Donald Trump in support of what Jim just said, because it is happening separately. One of the intangibles is, and has nothing to do with the legal side, is that one is a sitting president, and Joe Biden is the sitting president, is facing fire that Donald Trump wouldn't have to face because he's not facing the press every day. He doesn't have spokespeople facing the press every day, and he can sort of control his narrative in his own way as picked up by the people that he speaks to. So it puts the president, as it should be, the president of the United States, whether it's Joe Biden or anybody else, at the disadvantage of having to face the press or having his people face the press on it every day. The other thing is that what Republicans are saying, and the narrative that Trump is trying to spin through his surrogates, is why are we to trust the Biden lawyers, right? Why are we to say that just because Joe Biden's lawyers turned it over and he was angelic with a halo over his head about it, why are we supposed to believe them? It's this whole era of mistrust that he has sown for quite a while that's continuing to this case. But by and large, what Jim just talked about, and what the Times op-ed said, very, very important. Those distinctions are very important, because these are two different cases, and the Biden, if we are to believe, and it is proven that Biden was forthright with all of this and his people were, then it makes it much more difficult on Donald Trump, who actually did the wrong thing.
I mean, they could have tried to cover it up, right? Biden's attorneys, they didn't have to come forward.
Well, Kim, part of the cover up, as it were, is that they didn't come forward in time. So a lot of the people on the other side are saying, well, we knew about this in November. There was a midterm election in November. Right. Why didn't we come forward with this stuff then? So whether or not it was a cover up or a delay, when it was actually brought forward, the presumption is that there was transparency about it. But there are a lot of people on the other side who said, well, you could have done it beforehand. But I don't know what the obligation is legally, and I don't know if there's any penalty in that.
The other thing that is being talked about is
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's no evidence that the White House actually knew before the midterm elections that I know.
100%. Yeah, that's true. That's very true, and that's important. Yeah.
And what we do know is that the Justice Department did, but we see how slowly the Justice Department works on almost anything. So a delay of a few days, which is what it was, isn't really that damning. It's fodder, and certainly the Republicans are going crazy with it. I mean, Jim Jordan, where's the raid? Well, there was no need for a raid. They turned it over. Yeah, that's why there was no raid.
And in essence, Jim, what you're saying means that the Justice Department learned a little bit about the timing of these things from James Comey, who came out and did what he did before the presidential election in 2016, that many think decided that election. So it may have been in the best interest of the public to lay low until such a thing, had to be divulged by the lawyers in the Justice Department, because it didn't have, particular impact in their judgment.
I know he's always kind of running because he's an influence, but technically he wasn't even on the ballot for the midterm elections, right? He wasn't even a candidate. So how applicable is the midterm elections to this whole thing?
Well, it's not, Biden wasn't, nor was Trump, but it is political, right? It could sway, these things do sway in one direction or another. If an independent voter, a Democrat who's disillusioned with the presidency for the president for one reason or another, who may vote against the White House, these are the kind of things that tip the scales in little ways and sometimes big ways. So that's probably why.
Yeah, I agree with that, because I think it was true that it hurt Trump and it hurt the Republicans that they found these documents way before the midterms. And they suffered from that, and they suffered from the abortion issue. Those were things that really piled up on Trump. So if the Republicans could have said, wait a minute, and thrown out their whataboutism about Biden before the elections, it's possible that it could have swayed some of those voters. So, there is an argument about that, but my go-to is on this. It was only a few days, and things don't work that quickly at the Justice Department, and there's no evidence yet that it went to the White House and the White House somehow squashed it. Maybe that'll happen. Maybe we'll find that out. But right now, there's not been any evidence of that.
The point's being made that Biden's lawyers called archives immediately. Archives took possession the next day. This is from Carol. Thank you for that. I also think that one of the questions that's being asked, and this is sort of the way that there is an equivalency attempted, okay, to try to make the two the same, is, well, let's it's all about what the documents were. I mean, let's take a good look at what the documents were, knowing that there's no way we're really going to know what the documents were. So you can sort of have to me, it's laughable. One guy took 11,000 documents and, as you suggest, defeated or evaded a subpoena, has them being moved all over. There's like whack-a-mole trying to get these documents out of the Trump organization and that's the reason for the FBI showing up. And they still didn't get all of them. As it turns out, they're more. The other is, I get it, and I've said it before, this is crazy with these guys taking these documents home and that they're showing up in Biden's garage, but the notion that he was trying to hide something that doesn't appear to be played out in any kind of substantive way. So what they try to do is they say, well, but what about those? What are the documents exactly that are in the? So is there traction in that questioning?
Yeah, I mean, if they're super sensitive and they're being used to nefarious end, I mean, that was the problem with the Trump documents, is that they were left out, they were shown, they were shared. There was a carelessness alleged, which there certainly wasn't with Joe Biden. His seemed to have been locked away in closets and being moved and were discovered while being moved. So I know boxes that were being moved. So again, I think we need to know more about it, but it certainly seems like the sensitivity of it, when you look at what Trump did versus what Biden did or what their people did, or they did themselves, but it doesn't seem that the president certainly did this himself. There is a difference in that, and the sensitivity and the people that they have access to in terms of sharing them in a classified way is very. That's the disturbing part.
What I think Biden
ahead,
needs to do, and I agree with everything Michael said about the documents. It's important we find out what they are, or at least we have them characterized to us by the Justice Department or by a committee in Congress. We need to know that. We won't know the details because they're secret. We're not supposed to know the details. But what the Biden administration needs to do, if I was advising them, if they asked me, which they certainly do not, is find out who moved them. Why was there a problem? Why did this happen? And then fire somebody, because it's clear that the president did not know about this. I mean, it's pretty clear that Joe Biden wasn't moving boxes around and it doesn't appear as though he was hiding anything. They turned it over, so they weren't hiding anything. So then they have to find out how this happened, because it is stupid that this happens, and recommend how this not happen anymore, and then find somebody who they did, not a scapegoat, but it's somebody who was responsible. Whether it was at the archives or at the, I don't know where it would have been, GSA or whatever, but that they need to be disciplined.
But I would argue also, now with both of these incidents, however different they are, we now have seen there's a hole in the system, right? So there needs to be a new way of managing government documents. What that might be digitally, it might be different controls, something. So maybe if the Biden administration can set up a new system and say, look, we have a problem here, here's how we're going to fix it, at least that might do something.
Yeah, I mean,
I agree with that.
I mean, it's hard to argue against that. I mean, this system as it is clearly is not working, right?
Unfortunately, that's not the sexy part of the story, and
sorry.
Something that
right. Michael's right.
I mean, I couldn't agree more, and I'm sure the archives is on it more than the administration, because it really comes under their purview. But truthfully, that's not going to get the attention just yet.
I have to ding purview before we go. All right, now I want to quickly move on to something that I don't think is getting quite the play. Maybe it's obscured by some of these other things we're talking about, just for sexiness, as you say, kind of just for clicks, But what's going on in Ukraine is interesting to me, and the way that we are both stepping up our support on one level. I mean, we're actually literally having Ukrainian military people come here for training, coming to this country for training. But also we're sending in, and NATO is sending in these military vehicles, these tanks that are, heavily fortified to help Ukrainians while also not providing air power, of course, as you're aware. So you see the balancing act that the NATO countries and that the U.S., which is sort of leading this parade, is trying to strike. And they're also, it would seem, they're wanting to work towards some kind of agreement, some kind of end, some kind of finish to this. All of this is going on at the same time. I'm wondering if you can just give me your take on Ukraine through the winter and how you see this all playing, if not playing out, playing through the spring season. Jim Avila?
Well, Michael, why don't you go first? Because I've got like a 10-car accident out.
That's why Jim reporting live from Kyiv. I spoke to a Democratic Party person, I guess it was late last week, who was talking. We were talking about Ukraine a little bit and how that's going to play. So you look at. He said to me something, and this isn't verbatim, but basically that it's rare that something that is politically expedient at the moment and is also right happen. It's like the perfect storm. And what the Democrats see in supporting, and what this administration sees in supporting, with a full-throated support of Ukraine right now, is putting a Republican House of Representatives, a Republican leader, and Republicans nationally on the defense of Russia, putting them in a position to defend Russia and defend Putin. They know that this is going to be protracted until there's some kind of peace that doesn't seem within a whiff of happening. But by pushing forward with initiatives to continue to help Ukraine, they see that there's political value to that as well as the general good. But you're also, in doing that, putting countries like Germany on their heels, because Germany doesn't want to send tanks, and Germany has an interesting history with militarily supporting Russia that we can look back at over the past 80, 90 years. But at the same time, what is happening in Ukraine is I think a surprise to a lot of people, because Ukraine is still in this, and actually to a great extent winning this battle with Russia. So also getting behind a winner is an important part of the calculus here.
Jim?
It's almost like, I'm sorry, Kim, you want to go ahead?
I just wanted to break a little bit of news since we're talking about Ukraine. There's a story from Time magazine they just put out that a Navy SEAL was killed fighting in Ukraine. This person was apparently on active deserter status, but was in Ukraine fighting alongside Ukrainian forces. His name is Daniel Swift, and he suffered injuries with a unit under attack by Russia. So I don't know if that's the first report. I think it may be the second or third of an American fighting in Ukraine that has died in this war.
Yeah, he's a vigilante, right? I mean, it's not any part of any organized.
Not official.
Right.
Are you trying to swift vote him?
Yeah. I would not want to be in charge right now, to tell you the truth, because what you do about Ukraine is, besides the political ramifications, which Michael has spoken to, the ramifications for us as a society and as a world is just, it's off the charts. I mean, it's the Cold War all over again. It is the Cuban Missile Crisis all over again. One mistake by either side means that it could be nuclear war, and you're dealing with somebody who is, with Putin, who is not stable and not dependable. Crazily, we used to think of Khrushchev as this crazy guy who was banging the shoe against on the table at the UN, but in the end, Khrushchev was pretty reasonable, and he decided, I'm not going to continue with the missiles in Cuba. I'm going to pull them back, and we all survived. And there was an off-the-book sort of resolution of that. We, decided we promised to take our missiles out of Turkey, and they took their missiles out of Cuba. There was some kind of resolution with a reasonable side. We don't have that now. We have a guy you can't trust. He's unpredictable. If we send in, look, I'd love, for the Ukrainians to win this war, but do I want to send American tanks in, and American war airplanes in? No, I don't want World War III. And it is a very, very scary and situation that I do not have a good resolution for. And I don't think anybody.
It's already clearly a proxy war. I mean, we've got, and now there's pressure on Germany to supply these Leopard tanks that they're talking about, and Germany's sort of
Right.
slow walking it. I mean, you see how everybody is sort of where Jim is, which is like, I got to do something. I don't want to do. There's a reluctance to become involved, and yet there's also a feeling that there's an imperative to become involved. So these have to be balanced. So
I think what you have to do, Mark, is look at this as Afghanistan, if you can. The Russians went into Afghanistan. The Americans supplied all these weapons, including the Stingers, which were shooting down helicopters and made it incredibly uncomfortable for the Russians to stay. And eventually the Soviets then did pull out. And I think we have to be ready for this to be a long war and not try to end it quickly by continuing to escalate with these weapons, which will cause a retaliation either in NATO or in the United States by the Russians. My recommendation is to slow walk it, to continue to give them weapons that make it very uncomfortable for the Russians, and that they have to explain why their people are coming home in body bags, but not over the line to where we are antagonizing Putin to do something really stupid.
I wanted to get to the debt. I wonder if you can just give me 30 seconds on it. This is the Highwire Act that is also being played out by the GOP on the debt and the debt limit and the debt ceiling. Michael Shure, give me a quick, if you could, just a quick sense of how that's playing out.
Well, I mean, Janet Yellen told us this week, the head of the Fed, that we've reached our debt limit, and the Congress is up against the wall. I imagine they're going to find a way to extend it, but they are also going to have to find some compromise in order to do that. And that usually means spending cuts, and Democrats are loath to do that. And already you see Democrats talking about entitlements, and you see Donald Trump talking about entitlements too, in framing his soon-to-be presidential candidacy. He said he's going to go to CPAC and talk about entitlements when he goes to the Conservative Political Action Committee and speaks once again. So that's what people are going to be looking at. I don't think there's a fear. I mean, there probably is among some that we're not going to be able to raise the ceiling, but how we get there is what is frightening to both moderates on both sides as well as the extremes on both sides of the aisle.
Jim, a quick second from you.
This happens every time. The Republicans claim they don't want to raise the debt ceiling, although they did it 4 times under Donald Trump, and have repeatedly done it under Bush to pay for his wars. So, should we live within our means? Yes, we should. Are we? No, we never have, and we continue to raise the debt ceiling. There'll be when I was covering the White House, this happened every year, and it was painful. And park rangers got laid off, and they closed national parks, and those type of things will start happening. And Social Security payments may be late. When that starts happening, even the GOP is going to have to come around, and there'll be some kind of negotiation. I don't think people outside the Beltway who live where we live are that upset about it, and I don't think we ought to be that upset about it yet.
Jim Avila, Michael Shure, thank you. Appreciate you being here every Friday, and the audience so appreciates your takes. Always clear, always terrific, and we appreciate it. Have a good weekend. Go, Michael, Niners. Yeah, it could be a tougher game, but
it will be a tougher game. But the Niners are good. They have a good defense. As long as a rookie quarterback can keep motoring, that's the question: is when is that that bubble going to pop?
He's got a lot of help, McCaffrey, and
he has a lot of help. That's true.
I think is a great one too, who sort of lives in the shadow of Deebo Samuels. But anyway, it's going to be a great game, and looking forward to talking about it next week and the Niners' victory. Michael and Jim, thank you, boys. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.